Among the countless mysteries of the Russian Empire, one story continues to intrigue historians to this day. It is the mystery of the Medallion of Tsarevich Alexei, the last hope of the Romanov Dynasty, a relic that disappeared in the fog of the revolution. What role did this amulet play in the fate of the heir? Why was it sought after all over the world? And what does this lost symbol of a bygone era mean for Russia today? Every fact comes from verified archives. Let's dive into a documentary investigation of the most dramatic mystery of family artifacts in the history of our country. At MET pause plus sex 4.0. There are figures in the history of the Russian Empire who seem to be shrouded in mystery. One such figure was Tsarevich Alexei Nikolaevich, son of the last Russian emperor, Nicholas II. From the moment he was born in Peterhof, Alexei became the embodiment of the Romanov Dynasty's hopes for the continuation of their line. His birth in 1919 was a long-awaited sign for many subjects, as misfortune had plagued the family. Before the birth of her son, Alexandra Fyodorovna, his mother, had suffered several miscarriages, and only this time did fate bless the empress with a boy. The heir's childhood was not without trouble. Even as a baby, it became clear that the boy had a serious hereditary blood disorder called hemophilia. This illness became a family curse, known only to a small circle of close friends and family. While the gates of the Winter Palace were crowded with the 1.5 million inhabitants of St. Petersburg, the imperial family lived in constant fear for the life of their heir. Any scratch could be fatal. His father, Nicholas II, loved his son with all his heart. The letters left in the archives are filled with anxiety and tender care. Alexei grew up surrounded by his sisters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. They adored him, but also protected him too strictly. Frequent visits to holy places, palace tutors, walks along the alleys of Livadia, everything was subordinated to the idea of protecting the child at any cost. At the same time, the prince was a boy with a lively character. Contemporaries wrote about his dual nature. Sometimes he would smile openly, and then his gaze would betray a sad awareness of his fragility. Other children of the nobility envied his toy soldiers, but in his games he often imagined himself not as the victor, but as a defender, as if he understood that his main mission was to carry an invisible cross. The participation of the holy elder Grigory Rasputin added to the atmosphere of mysticism. People whispered about him in the courtyard and in the capital. According to memoirs, the healer of the Tsarevich had saved the boy from severe crises more than once with his mysterious power. Since then, all of Alexei's personal belongings took on an almost religious significance. Among them, a mysterious medallion, an amulet intertwined with the drama of the last years of the Romanovs, held a special place. Rumors about the purpose of the medallion did not appear immediately. No one remembered exactly when it first appeared in the prince's possession. Some claimed that the medallion was given to him by his mother on a special occasion. Others said it was a gift from his father. The memoirs of the princess's ladies-in-waiting contain references to the mysterious object, but most often it was shrouded in silence. By the beginning of the first decade of the 20th century, persistent rumors were circulating among the imperial court that the heir had an item that was destined to play a fateful role. According to his tutors, Alexei himself treated the medallion as something extremely important and rarely parted with it. However, outwardly it was unremarkable, simple in form, with minimalist patterns, and modest in size. The secret lay within, but only a few people knew about it, the closest of whom were the court physician, Evgeny Serov, and the tutor Pierre Gilliard. The heir's early years were a series of official ceremonies, attempts to give the boy a normal childhood despite his fate and his loneliness within the amber halls of the palace. The medallion became part of this world, an inconspicuous but key talisman connecting the boy's personal history with the great history of the country. Tragic trials awaited him, but it was from childhood that the meaning of the medallion began to unfold. It was not just a decoration, but a symbol, a sign of alarm, hope, and perhaps a premonition of loss. The beginning of 1917 marked a turning point for the Romanov family, between an era of power and a series of disasters. In Petrograd, the country was torn apart by unrest, and the threat of revolution hung over the Winter Palace, which had seemed eternal. Alexei Nikolaevich, still a young boy, suddenly found himself in the eye of the storm, where every day brought new worries. The house was filled with uncertainty, constant discussions, closed doors, and unspoken words in the eyes of the adults. His father, Emperor Nicholas II, was sometimes sad, sometimes distant. His mother, Alexandra Fyodorovna, spent more time with her son, protecting him not only from physical harm, but also from the oppressive feeling of general disintegration. His sisters tried to maintain the old way of life, doing housework, needlework, and writing letters. But behind these peaceful rituals, a sense of oppression was palpable. In the atmosphere of the palace, the medallion began to play a crucial role. People spoke of it in hushed tones. Many believed that this amulet could protect the prince from the curse of blood and possible misfortune. During those turbulent months, his mother often recalled her son's miraculous recovery after Rasputin touched him. She believed that if Alexei was with the medallion, nothing terrible would happen to him. The revolutionary events, which at first seemed distant, now invaded even the closed world of the Romanovs. In February, crowds of workers and soldiers marched through the streets of the capital, calling for a new order. With each passing day, the palace guards became more and more anxious, and there was increasing talk about the children's safety. In private rooms, secret notes were passed around, and news was concealed so as not to upset Alexei. But he, a growing boy with an inquisitive mind, understood everything. He was too sensitive to the changes. In the spring, the situation deteriorated sharply. After abdicating the throne, Nicholas II remained first and foremost a father, but no longer the ruler of the country. Alexei tried to take care of his mother, who comforted him in her motherly arms. The family was placed under internal house arrest, first in Tsarskoye Selo, then in Tobolsk. The luxury of the palace was replaced by the cold restraint of a provincial mansion, a reminder that the past was gone and that hopes for salvation were fading with each passing month. Amidst the fears and anxieties of his mother and sisters, the prince cherished the medallion especially. It became a talisman, a link to better days, a fragile hope for protection. Some officers, risking their lives, brought the family news from outside. Some whispered legends. If the medallion fell into the wrong hands, the dynasty would perish. The uncertainty cast a truly ominous shadow, and through it the prince grew up, serious and sad beyond his years. The fall of the monarchy was beyond the comprehension of a child's mind, but Alexei quickly learned to hide his feelings. He could not shake the feeling that the medallion was not just a family heirloom, but something more, perhaps a legacy for all future generations. In those days, the family's life was dominated by a desperate struggle for survival. Outside the walls, a new era was dawning. The capital had become Petrograd, and everything had changed in a matter of weeks. Every object took on new meaning, and every prayer was said with a sense of finality. In these circumstances, according to those close to him, the medallion connected old Russia with the last remnants of strength, trying to hold on to the slippery edge. Among the few surviving documents relating to the prince's personal belongings, the medallion itself always occupied a special place. Its origin remained shrouded in mystery for a long time. Disputes about when and under what circumstances it first came into Alexei Nikolaevich's possession continue to this day. Archival records from the private correspondence of the imperial family and their entourage have been discovered. The diaries of Anna Vyrubova, a lady-in-waiting, and Pierre Gilliard, a tutor, contain references to a certain amulet that accompanied the heir from an early age. In one of Alexandra Fyodorovna's letters to her husband Nicholas II, there is a phrase, "Let our boy not part with that holy talisman." This phrase is repeated in several versions, and historians tend to believe that it was referring to the medallion. There is a version that the medallion was given to Alexei during a pilgrimage to holy places in his childhood. Archival photographs show that, in a number of pictures, a thin chain with a small pendant hanging from the boy's neck resembles the description of the medallion. No documented information about the craftsman who created the medallion has been found, but among the valuables of the Romanov family, such items often had a unique symbolic character. Some records indicate that the medallion was ordered by the empress in secret. It was believed to be made of gold and enamel, with a miniature relic inside, such as a piece of a holy object or a note with a prayer. According to legend, this feature gave the item additional sacred significance. Documents from the synod and correspondence with the clergy also mention a certain protective sign that was intended exclusively for the heir. People close to the family wrote that these items were included in the children's lives with the blessing of the spiritual fathers of John of Kronstadt and Grigory Rasputin. The need for secrecy was especially emphasized. Only the most trusted people were allowed to know the details. Historians have repeatedly analyzed comparisons of different descriptions of the medallion. According to some sources, it was a small round object engraved with a trembling angel. According to others, a modest white gold disc with a secret bas-relief. Hung on a thin chain, it attracted little attention on Alexei's body. But during prayers and serious conversations, his mother asked him to hold the amulet in his palm. These discrepancies in the sources support the aura of mystery, making the story of the medallion's appearance a subject of scientific and amateur research. However, it is precisely at the intersection of established archival evidence and personal memories that an image has survived. The medallion was not a random toy, but a carefully selected, deeply personal item for the prince. Its appearance became part of an ancient tradition of protecting the heir to the dynasty from misfortune and adversity. The Romanovs knew how to imbue family heirlooms with deep meaning. This was especially true for the young heir. Every amulet, every icon, every relic was first and foremost a symbol of hope, protection, and faith. The medallion intended for Alexei was not just a decoration. In the Orthodox tradition, family amulets often accompanied rulers from infancy. They contained sacred objects, prayers, and sometimes relics associated with icons or holy remains to strengthen the spiritual connection with higher powers. For a family plagued by turmoil and illness, belief in the power of such a talisman was especially important. The symbolism of Alexei's medallion was determined by several factors. First, it was a sign of his parents' special care, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, he was not alone. Second, the medallion symbolized a connection to the ancient history of the Romanov family. The tradition of giving amulets to heirs dates back to the 17th century. According to Pierre Gilliard's memoirs, the medallion was part of Alexei's daily ritual. As soon as he woke up, he would check that the chain was still there. Before the icons, he would clasp the amulet in his palm, sometimes whispering short prayers taught to him by his mother. During turbulent political events, when fear haunted the entire family, it gave him strength. His social circle and even palace officials noticed that Alexei seemed to change when he had the medallion with him. He became more collected, calmer, and deeply thoughtful. Perhaps even then, despite his young age, he felt himself to be the guardian not only of his own life, but also of some greater task, a mission that his parents had invisibly entrusted to him. The superstitions and omens surrounding the medallion gave rise to much debate. Rumors circulated that in the midst of his illness, if the amulet was removed, the prince's health deteriorated sharply. The elders said, "The medallion is now his armor." This object was associated with what the entire royal family believed in, that miracles were possible even when reality was crumbling around them. Over time, it became clear that the medallion's significance went far beyond that of a personal relic. It came to be seen as a symbol of invulnerability, memory, and the invisible connection between the ruling family and the fate of the empire. It was during these years, when a threat hung over all of Russia, that the medallion became a kind of double in the boy's fate. The vulnerable heir and the fragile amulet were both guardians of a fleeting era. Both became the center of a mystery, surrounded by speculation and controversy. The story of how the medallion for the heir to the Romanovs was made is just as mysterious as its future. Even though there's no direct mention of who made the medallion in the official imperial inventory lists, researchers in the 20th and 21st centuries have been able to piece together what might have happened. From letters written by Alexandra Fyodorovna to her confessor and courtiers, it can be indirectly inferred that the medallion was commissioned from a master craftsman who possessed a rare skill in working with religious symbols. Recent research suggests that it may have been made by jeweler Carl Fabergé or one of his closest disciples working in the imperial workshops in St. Petersburg. The materials from which the medallion was made are a mystery. Archival descriptions preserve the following phrases: high-grade white gold, blue enamel reminiscent of the sky, and an inner niche for storing a small relic. According to some accounts, a tiny piece of wood, supposedly from Golgotha, several threads from the belt of the Blessed Virgin Mary, or a piece of paper with a handwritten prayer were placed inside. The manufacturing technology required the highest level of craftsmanship. The main task was to ensure not only beauty, but also secrecy. The medallion had to be such that only the chosen few could reveal its essence. The miniature engraving on the inside was particularly difficult. It was believed that only 2 people knew the exact design of the bas-relief. The priests who participated in the consecration of the object confirmed the spiritual importance of the new relic. The act of blessing, signed by the abbot of one of the capital's major monasteries, noted the rare solemnity of the ceremony of handing over the medallion. It was sometimes suggested that the medallion might contain a small amount of relic stones consecrated on Mount Athos. However, there is no confirmed information about this, only mentions in later memoirs and eyewitness accounts. All these details reinforce the aura of mystery surrounding the artifact, transforming it from a simple piece of jewelry into a complex symbol, a part of family history, an object of worship, and a masterpiece of jewelry art. Within the closed circle of the Romanov family, in a world of daily worries and anxieties, Tsarevich Alexei's medallion became the object of almost mystical worship. To an outside observer, this item around the boy's neck was just one of many pieces of jewelry. But to those closest to the royal family, it meant much more. The memories of palace servants, Maria Vasilyevna Melnikova's nanny, and Pierre Gilliard's tutor, have preserved special details of everyday life. How Alexei placed the medallion on his pillow before praying in the morning, how he fiddled with it when he was shivering with fever, how he protected it even when playing and going for walks. These actions were not so much superstition as a conscious attempt to maintain control over his fate in incredibly difficult circumstances. After the death of the holy elder Grigory Rasputin, there was a constant anxious anticipation within the Roslo family. What would the new day bring? Who would now protect the heir from harm if his beloved healer had left this world? Against this backdrop of growing fear, a certainty prevailed. The medallion was the boy's last personal shield. Alexandra Fyodorovna sat her son next to her, stroked his head, repeated a prayer, and involuntarily touched the medallion with her hand, and the entire court fell silent until the boy felt a little better. At times, when he was alone with his father, Alexei tried to find out the secret of the artifact. According to contemporaries, Nicholas II tended to avoid such questions, and only once remarked, "It is a talisman passed down to the most beloved sons in difficult times." The answer, full of understatement, only reinforced the feeling that the medallion was fateful. The topic of personal responsibility for the amulet often came up in conversations with his sisters. Maria and Anastasia joked that it was this amulet that gave their brother special powers. But behind the light-hearted words, lay a serious reflection on each item that remained from their former greatness. When the disturbing nighttime hearings began behind the palace walls, whether they were conversations among officers or rumors from the kitchen staff, Alexei always kept the medallion close to his heart, as if he felt it was an anchor amid the stormy waves of fate. Even during his days of house arrest in Tobolsk and Yekaterinburg, amid the gray walls and corridors devoid of familiar luxuries, the medallion never left Alexei. The maids who cleaned his room recalled that the boy hid his precious possession under his pillow or under his shirts so that no one would dare touch it. There was no trace of the trustfulness typical of teenagers. Family heirlooms could only be entrusted to those closest to him. A curious piece of evidence has been preserved in the epistolary sources of those years. Shortly before the tragic events connected with the execution of the royal family, Alexei spent a long time looking at the medallion in the light, as if trying to read in its miniature patterns a way to salvation, or at least hope for the continuation of his family history. The symbol of the artifact crossed the line of a simple object and became a guiding thread in a destiny torn apart by history. The revolution, spreading across the empire, penetrated even the strongest walls. At the beginning of the 19th year of the 17th century, when the whole country was buzzing with anxiety, the imperial family found themselves hostages. Gradually, their former privileges faded away. One by one, the palace lackeys, waiters, and tutors disappeared. Almost everything they cherished remained in the past, or fell into the hands of their overseers. One of the most painful losses for the family was their personal belongings. Archival documents and memoirs show that each child had their own rescue kit: icons, photographs, letters. For Alexei, the most important item was undoubtedly his medallion. It was the fate of this object that sparked decades of controversy and speculation. In the spring and summer of 1918, the family's situation became increasingly dangerous. They were moved from Tobolsk under heavy guard to Yekaterinburg, where the order of the Ural Regional Council hung over them. Documents show that during the final stage of the relocation, the heir tried not to let the medallion out of his hands for a minute. According to the protocols drawn up after the shooting in the Ipatiev house, there was nothing among the items found at the scene of the tragedy that clearly indicated the medallion. This gave rise to the first wave of rumors. Someone from the guards took the relic for themselves. Someone hid it or sold it on the black market. Versions multiplied. Allegedly, one of the soldiers guarding the house found the gold jewelry on the boy's body and hid it. Afraid to say the name of the owner, there is evidence that immediately after the tragedy, an unofficial search of the family's personal belongings began. Even scraps of fabric with bloodstains were examined as possible carriers of precious items. However, the official inventory lists only crosses, a pair of children's silver spoons, and several unmarked medallions with Orthodox prayers, common to all those arrested. Historical sources claim that the disappearance of the medallion is one of the most mysterious pages in Russian history. It is not known for certain whether it was taken by investigators, handed over to a special department for safekeeping, or fell into the hands of unknown persons who later destroyed it, resold it, or destroyed it. The disappearance of the artifact became the subject of a real historical drama. From that day on, people began to speak in a special tone about the fate of the medallion, as a vivid symbol of a country that had disappeared so tragically, suddenly. After the revolutionary upheavals, the fate of the relic became the subject of intense attention, both from experts and ordinary people. The first attempts to find the medallion were made as early as the 1920s. At that time, investigators working on the case of the murder of the royal family examined the items found in Yekaterinburg and carefully documented every scratch on the scraps of clothing and every item left behind after the tragedy. An important event was the examination of personal belongings recovered from the bottom of the Ganina Yama mine in the late 1930s. Among the artifacts, several pieces of jewelry were found, including icons, crosses, and earrings. However, No medallion with a description similar to Alexei's relic was found among them. This setback gave rise to many stereotypes. Perhaps the relic had disappeared forever, or perhaps it was waiting for its moment in a private collection. Periodically, notes appeared in the Soviet press about mysterious finds of imperial treasures taken abroad. In the late 1950s, reports surfaced in Paris and then in London about the sale at auction of small gold medallions, presumably related to the royal family. However, none of these jewelry items were officially identified as belonging to the Romanov heir. In the 1960s and 1970s, interest in the fate of the medallion intensified again after the publication of the memoirs of Alexander Avdeyev, one of the investigators of the Ipatyev house case. Avdeyev claimed that he saw something resembling a medallion on one of the boys' bodies, but after the body was opened, the item disappeared. This version circulated among Soviet historians for a long time, supplemented with new details, but no direct confirmation ever appeared. At the turn of the 8th and 9th decades of the 20th century, information surfaced that a certain gold ornament, kept by private collectors in the United States, resembled the missing medallion in design and size. Several independent experts claimed to have seen a similar item, but there was no evidence to support this. No one presented any documents proving its origin. All attempts to find it were accompanied by sensationalism and skepticism. The disputes and scandals continued. But each time the story of the medallion became even more mysterious, turning from a private drama of a boy into a true symbol of a lost era. Since the mid-20th century, the mystery of Prince Alexei's medallion has become one of the most popular topics among both professional historians and numerous sensation seekers. In the absence of clear evidence, a wide variety of hypotheses and stories emerged, ranging from the mundane to the downright fantastical. The first and most widespread version was that the medallion was stolen by one of the guards who accompanied the family in their final days. It was claimed that the relic could have been hidden deep in a coat pocket and then smuggled to the West through a network of émigré intermediaries. This was reported in émigré newspapers and Soviet detective stories. Another, equally popular version is recorded in the memoirs of members of the investigative commission. The medallion was so plain in appearance that the investigators simply did not pay any attention to it, and it was lost among many similar orthodox amulets. There were also some really wild theories. Some people said the medallion could have been secretly hidden in the wall or floor of one of the mansions used as temporary shelters for the Romanov family. In Yekaterinburg, private searches of buildings were even conducted using modern equipment, such as metal detectors and special cameras. All in vain. No trace of the relic was found. Interviews with descendants of the guards describing the last day of the family in the Ipatyev house often boiled down to memories of the search for the jewels. Some recalled that Alexei had something around his neck that he wouldn't let go of, but the details varied each time. Supporters of mystical explanations did not remain on the sidelines. They said that the amulet was created according to an ancient ritual, and with its loss, the country lost its destiny. Of course, there is no scientific confirmation of this theory, but in the public imagination, the medallion increasingly became not just a piece of jewelry, but a magical key to an entire lost dynasty. And yet, despite the mass of rumors, it was the lack of concrete, material evidence and an object for analysis that made Tsarevich Alexei's medallion one of the most elusive and mysterious historical relics in Russia. Scientific methods also played a role in the search for the truth about the fate of Tsarevich Alexei's medallion. At the end of the 20th century, after official investigations into the death of the Romanov family, Russian and foreign historians returned to the artifacts found at the sites of key events. Particular attention was paid to any jewelry preserved among the excavated fragments of clothing and personal belongings. In the early 1990s, during the exhumation of remains found in the area of Ganina Yama and Stara Kopyakovskaya Road, archaeologists and forensic experts described many small items, buttons, brooches, crosses, sometimes badly damaged by time and chemicals. Each such object underwent double and even triple examination. The composition of the metals, style, and engraving techniques were checked. Of particular interest were finds that resembled Alexei's medallion, round signed pendants, fragments of chains, and miniature cases. Researchers from the Hermitage and the State Historical Museum compared these finds with archival photographs, descriptions in diaries, and the recollections of people close to the royal family. The main problem was that many similar items were typical of the time, and the unique ownership of any of them could only be proven by rare details, for example, special initials or secret marks in the engraving. However, the main judicial investigations of the late 20th and early 21st centuries did not provide a definitive answer as to whether the medallion was among the finds. Disputes flared up after each new media report or the appearance of another sensational publication in scientific journals. But each time the experts came to the conclusion that there was no consensus. Too many things disappeared or were destroyed in the first days after the tragedy. As a result, the most reliable arguments were based on circumstantial evidence, which only reinforced the aura of mystery surrounding the relic. Even facts confirmed by absolutely accurate analytical methods could not answer the question, where is the heir's real medallion? The debate continues to this day. For some scholars, the question has been resolved, while for others, the mystery remains unsolved. In the last 2 decades of the 21st century, public interest in the fate of the prince's medallion has flared up with renewed vigor. Sensational reports that the very artifact had been found became headline news on historical programs and museum forums. The first such wave arose in the early 2000s, when an unknown collector from Europe claimed to have an ornament in his collection that was definitely from the Romanov family. He promised to send photographs and documents to experts, but no detailed information ever followed, and the artifact disappeared from view once again. A little later, an amulet matching the description of the relic in several respects was unexpectedly discovered in a private Russian collection. Long expert evaluations and comparisons with old photos and archival letters showed that there were many similarities, but still not enough direct evidence. The press was abuzz. The discussion reached international levels, and the prince's name was once again in the spotlight. But no authoritative conclusion was ever announced. The third sensation came from across the ocean. A group of descendants of Russian immigrants handed over an antique jewel to a New York museum for temporary storage, which had allegedly been preserved by loyal servants of the family. However, examination did not reveal any convincing individual characteristics. Each new discovery caused a storm of emotions. Fans of the Romanovs argued with independent historians, the media published dozens of assumptions, and the scientific community insisted that a full cycle of research was necessary. From microscopy, archival comparisons. Attacks against each other became commonplace. Some experts swore that they were holding a unique family heirloom, while others said it was just a random trinket. Either way, none of the items found have yet been officially recognized as the mysterious amulet. The question of the authenticity of any artifacts associated with the last Romanovs has always attracted the close attention of experts. Analyses in recent years show that most items claiming to be relics of the Tsarevich undergo at least 3 stages of verification: external and stylistic comparison, microscopic examination of materials, and chemical analysis of the composition of metals and enamel. Leading expert centers in Russia and abroad have repeatedly concluded that absolute similarity in appearance does not necessarily indicate that an item belonged to a specific person. And since jewelry of that time was made by hand, Miniature differences are sometimes invisible even to modern microscopes. Archival photos and documents often only allowed for the most general features to be compared: size, color, shape, and type of chain fastening. The most powerful arguments in the debate over authenticity came from carefully researched finds, which, based on expert analysis, were either declared fakes or left without a definitive conclusion. Conservative historians argued that the real relic was most likely lost, and that modern claimants were either mistaken or trying to make a profit. At the same time, the technical level of analysis at the beginning of the third decade of the 21st century had grown so much that interest in the topic did not fade. Independent laboratories were set up, international scientists held verification sessions, and new archival data was revealed, including previously secret reports from the pre-revolutionary police. All this complicated the discussion, leaving both supporters and skeptics in each camp. Every mistake in the tests or publication of a refutation received widespread attention. Journalists from many countries focused on the controversial results of the expert examinations, sometimes sensationalizing fragmentary information. Today, it is generally accepted that the question of the medallion's fate remains open, and science is waiting for a breakthrough. Perhaps future relic recognition technology will have the final say. Over the years, the mystery of Tsarevich Alexei's medallion has ceased to be a private family drama and has become an integral part of Russia's cultural and social memory. Its story has come to symbolize an entire era: the fall of the monarchy, the demise of a great dynasty, and the tragic turning point in Russian history. In literature, cinema, and memorial journalism, the medallion is increasingly depicted as a symbol of hope, tragedy, loss, and at the same time, unbroken human dignity. Writers at the turn of the century and contemporary researchers have portrayed the relic in their works as a key to national self-understanding. The medallion became a kind of reminder. The past always leaves traces, even if there is almost no material evidence left. In feature films of the last century, numerous attempts were made to reconstruct the fate of the artifact. Screenwriters and directors took archival memories as a basis, adding elements of drama and mysticism. Sometimes the object became the central power object, sometimes a silent witness to a catastrophe. On theater stages and in museum exhibitions, only a small copy could serve as a symbol of an era, bringing tears to the eyes of viewers. Contemporary public discussions on this topic are not limited to academic circles. Numerous blogs, social networks, and even school lessons on local history recall Alexei's story through the image of his lost amulet. Tour guides in Yekaterinburg and St. Petersburg sometimes remark, "Alexei's medallion is like the last voice of a Russia that no longer exists." In conclusion, this small piece of jewelry, which disappeared in the turmoil of the revolutions, never became mere historical evidence, lives on in the memory of the people as a symbol of honor and tragedy, and still stirs the minds of people in all corners of the country and among the émigré community. The story of the disappearance of Tsarevich Alexei's medallion has given rise to a huge number of scientific and paranormal theories. In recent decades, the debate about the fate of the relic has taken on the proportions of a cultural phenomenon. Some publications have focused on forensic analysis, from reviewing the conclusions of investigative commissions to re-examining the found jewels. Researchers, armed with modern microscopy and mass spectrometry, have repeatedly attempted to bring to justice artifacts claiming to be genuine family heirlooms, but each time they have been hampered by a lack of authentic archival sources. Inconsistencies in the transfer of inheritance. Psychologists and cultural experts also influenced the exploration of this topic. Popular memory, fueled by the upheavals of the 20th century, gave the medallion the status of an indispensable symbol of the end of the dynasty. The media actively discussed theories of magical protection of the dynasty and the myth of the curse of the Romanov family, allegedly linked to the loss of the artifact. Many pointed out that immediately after the death of the family, A period of long civil wars broke out in Russia, which, according to mystics, was a consequence of the removal of the talisman. Skeptics, on the contrary, argued that a piece of jewelry could not have any mystical power, and that the endless circulation of stories about miracles was just a form of national self-reassurance. However, for some members of society, even discussing the topic became a way to replenish their lost connection with the great past and find an anchor in history. New technological possibilities promise to change the conditions of the search. AI developers, artificial intelligence experts, and criminologists have modeled algorithms for recognizing the miniature stylistic features of Fabergé, the masters of the court jewelry workshops. Projects have emerged to verify the pedigree of an item through DNA analysis, if traces remain on the inner surface of an amulet or in the structure of chain links. These are only projects so far, but the public is following every development, maintaining its fascination with the mystery. There are also completely alternative theories. Thanks to the flood of publications on the internet, versions often surface about secret keepers of the relic, about allegedly existing manuscripts containing new information about the medallion. But almost all such stories are quickly refuted by real historians. In general, real science still insists that either a unique material sign matching the archive data will be found, or the mystery will remain unsolved. Time separates us from the events surrounding the tragic death of the Romanov family and the disappearance of their relics by an ever-increasing distance. But interest in the fate of the medallion continues unabated. For thousands of people, this artifact has become a symbol not only of the personal tragedy of the boy heir, but also of the fate of an entire country in an era of change. Over the past 100 years, no other object has been the subject of so much searching, discussion, and controversy. Alexei's medallion has become a memorial image, and even its absence is perceived as a deep cultural rift. The mummies of Egyptian kings are found thousands of years later, but in Russian history, the disappearance of such an important relic still leaves room for mystery. The memory of the prince lives on in literature, cinema, memorials, and historical research. The Russian Orthodox Church canonized Alexei and his entire royal family as holy passion bearers, which only reinforced the symbolic significance not only of the boy's fate, but also of every object associated with him. Copies of the medallion are on display in major Russian and foreign museums, and among pilgrims and descendants of emigrants, the image has been preserved as part of personal family lore. Research continues. New documents and archival photos are appearing, and international projects to study the history of the last Romanovs are expanding. Young people and children learn about this story in school lessons and museum tours. The connection between the times remains, as does the desire to touch the great mystery. The medallion of Tsarevich Alexei remains a symbol of a bygone era and a reminder that the present is inextricably linked to the past. The search for it is not only a matter of archaeology and science, but also an element of national self-respect, a way of preserving the fragile thread of memory between generations.